light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Today I wanted to share a few thoughts about families. And obviously humanity is going through a time of transition where we're having to redefine a great many fundamental things, fundamental components of life. I suppose for as long as there have been human beings on this earth, there has been some sense of family, but the definition has changed radically, and in the next half hour perhaps I can come up with some thoughts that'll scratch the surface and encourage you to think about how the word family plays out in your life, how it has played out in the lives of those you've known and at different points in your life. Certainly there's always more to say on any subject, because in the little half hour we have for this show, there's never enough time to say everything that could be said. And as always, if you have a different perspective on things, I'd be very interested in talking with you if you'd like to become a guest within a future episode of the show. In any case, in my own struggles with family, I suppose, on one hand, I want to be careful not to, one might say, demonize or describe a person or a thing as being somehow the embodiment of evil. Because I think every person that we ever meet, every person to whom we're ever related, is a combination of good and bad qualities. There are times, even for myself, when I do the right thing, and there are times when I do the wrong thing. And I hope that people will love me for the times when I do the right thing and forgive me during those times when I do the wrong thing. And for my part, I will always be striving to do more of the right things and less of the wrong things. For a while there was discussion of the term dysfunctional families, and after a while it seemed most people got to the point of concluding that basically every family is dysfunctional in some way or another. From one perspective, that could be a good thing, because having a dysfunctional family means you will have challenges to your thinking and your emotions that you get to process as an adult, things that you can keep coming back to that can keep you growing, keep you learning about how do relationships work. And if I do this, will the other person really respond a certain way? Or perhaps I will get a variety of possible responses. And I've heard parents say, for example, that every child is different. Even families, one of my cousin's families had, I think 15 children, 16 children if I remember correctly. Even with that many children, every single one of them was slightly different. And consequently, my aunt and uncle had to relate to each of their children in a slightly different way, because what worked for one child wouldn't necessarily work the same way with another child. And so the first thing to remember about families is that every relationship to some degree is unique. So there are no one-size-fits-all answers. There's not one method that works with every child. There's not one method that works with every family. Allowing that human beings, perhaps even by nature, are imperfect, are works in process, are growing and learning and developing. Sometimes people get stuck in negative patterns of behavior and have a great amount of difficulty getting out of them, and some people never do get out of those difficult patterns. Some people get caught in addictions that keep them from ever sharing their best qualities with the world around them. All that being said, there are some families that seem to be a bit more functional, shall we say. There are times when families are loving. There are some families where love never happens. and there are some families where love happens all the time. In speaking with a New Agey sort of spiritual friend once, they put forth the idea that, that person, he or she, and I'm trying to remember, it's been so long since we had that conversation, if it was a man or woman who told me this, and I don't remember, and it probably doesn't matter, but the idea was, why do we assume, or I think from their perspective, perhaps most people are not born into their true families, that a biological family is one context, but when you look for the true meaning of family, you have to look beyond your biological family. And if you are an especially gifted person, it may be very difficult for any biological family to relate well to you. And I don't mean to put down biological families by saying that, simply recognizing, what's an example? If you have the genius of Leonardo da Vinci, great many of the thinkers and artists and innovators and inventors, engineers even, they were people who in childhood didn't fit in because their thoughts were going in wonderful new directions where most people weren't even thinking that way. And ultimately, they found a way of making a positive contribution, and that's why we remember them. There were probably a great many other creative, inspired individuals who were not ever as recognized or as successful societally, and consequently we don't know their names or what exactly they had to give that society was unable to receive at that point. But the point being, they too most probably had great difficulty fitting in. And yet it wasn't that there was something wrong with them. It was that they had a way of seeing life and a way of relating to life that was unique and different and empowered, and could have been instructive to those around them if those around them had been willing to learn. But because, at the very least, they couldn't fit in, any biological family in which you would have placed them would have been a difficult experience, because nobody knew how to speak the language of that creative individual. Nobody knew how to see things the way they saw them. And in many cases, these gifted thinkers and creators of human history, the majority of them, I think it's safe to say, were not appreciated within their own lifetimes. In many cases, they're described as having been ahead of their time. So in each case, they would create a body of work, and then through illness, old age, or whatever, would pass on, and their body of work would be discovered by someone in a successive generation, maybe their children, their grandchildren, maybe somebody to whom they were not even related, found their work 100 years later and found it and understood it and found it totally fascinating and totally inspiring and just so empowering, and reintroduce them to a time that occurred 50 to 100 years after they were gone. And everyone was just totally euphoric and thrilled at the beauty of their work. Van Gogh's paintings now sell for millions of dollars. In his own lifetime, he only sold one painting, and that was only with the help of his brother Theo. He really was not appreciated in his own lifetime, and yet today we say he was an artistic genius. The work he created was so powerful and so exceptional, but it was not within his own lifetime that was recognized. So in a sense, you could say Van Gogh was ahead of his time. The work he was creating was, in a sense, intended. If all artwork is intended for that audience which is able to appreciate it, then Van Gogh's work was intended for a generation that wouldn't be born for 100 years, a couple hundred years after he was gone. And so he had to create a body of work, leave it behind, pass on, and wait for humanity to discover the work when humanity was finally ready. All of this comes back to that issue of family. There's a sense in which all of humanity is one big family, but I think almost anyone who's been to a family reunion knows that there will be a handful of people at the family reunion who just don't fit in, and everyone probably will try to be nice and polite and that sort of thing, but ultimately they're glad that they don't have to go home with that person, because there's just there's always some, shall we say, creatively wacky people in the family tree somewhere, if we get to know them. But if we do get to know them, we frequently find that they're fascinating people, but they can be very difficult to get along with because of various idiosyncrasies. Maybe the person who is creatively gifted in one way has great difficulty being organized in another area of their life. And so while you might appreciate the paintings or the photographs they create, trying to collaborate with them in setting the dinner table could be very frustrating. Someone who is really particular about setting the table just so, when everyone else kind of feels like it doesn't really matter. The food is good, the people are here, the people and the food are what matter, not the place settings. People have different priorities, different values, and it's okay. But the thing I keep coming back to is that each person is this combination of qualities we love and qualities that irritate us, and qualities that inspire us and qualities that make us glad we don't live with them 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Somehow, my faith tells me that the fact that this person exists means that they do belong someplace, and that there is something good that can come through this person. It becomes challenging, though, when we try to figure out what the definition of family is in that. Yes, we want to be inclusive, to include them in spite of their negative qualities that we can't stand just because they're family. To me, that kind of robs the word family of its meaning when you're doing it just because of a biological connection. I mean, it's not even particularly honest. But does that mean that we should have open fighting? That tell people when we don't like them, etc. That's probably going to the other extreme. On one hand, you can lie to them and say everything's fine when it's not. And on the other hand, you can be so honest and blunt about what bothers you that it becomes impossible to love or collaborate. Somewhere in the middle of all this is this place of integration, where we learn how to love the unlovely, and we learn how to nurture the best qualities in each other, bit by bit. And in many cases, the way we have to learn how is by refusing to give up on that person, refusing to walk away or leave. Even in that situation, however, there are points where essentially the other person creates circumstances according to which there's no other option, except to say, I've done all I can do. If you ever want to address this, my door is open to you. But I cannot live with this particular quality or addiction in your life. If, for example, someone is an alcoholic or a drug addict, and it's destroying their relationships and making it unsafe for other people to be around them, I think they need to know that the love is available. But they also need to be held accountable and to understand that the negative expressions and the negative consequences, the negative side effects of their addiction, whatever it is incompatible, is mutually exclusive with nurturing, empowering expressions of love. that when someone is absolutely drunk, you may love the person, but you cannot have a relationship of love with someone who is not mentally all there. Because, until the drunken state passes, you can't even have a coherent conversation that they'll remember, or that they can be counted on to remember. I think alcoholic beverages have their place in life, but when one engages in excess of virtually anything, food, alcohol, even exercise, when pushed to excess, it breaks down relationships, and especially familial relationships. When someone is so bent on exercising constantly that they're neglecting their family relationships, and they're not there when one of their family members needs someone to care and to listen. The exercise in that situation has become a negative thing. The challenge of living in a family context is putting all the pieces together so that they fit, and so that everyone is nurtured and empowered by them. That they're not enabled to continue negative behaviors and enabled to soak themselves in addictions, but instead they're held accountable to be the best that they can be, and empowered with encouragement or support to have the opportunities to demonstrate the best that they can be. That it's not just an ideological construct, but it's a real thing that they can do. Someone may be a brilliant engineer, but if you never give them any materials to build anything, it's nothing more than an idea on a paper. Someone may be a fantastic cook, but if you never let them into the kitchen and give them a chance to start cooking on their own, you'll never find out. The point of a family is to provide a relatively safe context in which each person can experiment and find those things that they do well, and find how they can do those things to the betterment of their family, to the betterment of humanity. In any case, coming back to my own family situation, there's a number of difficulties, but I don't know what the future might hold. In my case, my family decided that they had no place in their lives for an openly gay person, and so I've been estranged from my family for over 15 years now. And I did my best to make it clear to them that at whatever point they're ready to integrate an openly gay person into their lives, in a mutually respectful, wise, and loving fashion, I'm absolutely available. But I cannot engage in the psychological suicide of pretending to be something I'm not, just for the sake of their approval. And so in a sense, my door is always open, but not to their judgment, only to their growing, developing, loving spirits. And part of being in a loving relationship is being willing to be held accountable for one's words and actions and so forth. But it's also very much about having the freedom, having the ability to be honest and truthful with each other, and not to have to pretend something that simply isn't true, because someone finds it too difficult to deal with. Well, if they find it too difficult to deal with, then everyone around them needs to somehow nurture them until they do have the ability to deal with it, rather than insisting that it simply be, whatever the problem is, that it simply be avoided. We don't talk about that. We don't deal with it. We pretend it's not there. What we wind up with is a person who will never learn how to deal with that challenge. In any case, someone challenged me once to introduce myself as the son of my mother and father. And I had extreme difficulty with that, because in order to understand myself as a worthy person in any basic sense, that I, as much as anyone on earth, have the capacity for love, for wisdom, for growth, for development, for living life to the fullest. I've sometimes told friends I could go home tomorrow as long as I'm willing to pretend to be something I'm not. Because I have a commitment to truth and honesty, I choose to respect my parents' decision to not have an openly gay person in their lives by staying away. That's how I respect their decision. And so when I was challenged to introduce myself as their son, I really didn't know what to do with that, because I had to let go of trying to please them. I had to let go of wanting my mother and father to be proud of me in some sense, because I don't think they ever will be, because I absolutely did not turn out to be what they wanted me to be. And yet, looking in the mirror, I come back to saying, but I have to be myself. And I'm sorry, it's not acceptable to them, but I have to be myself. And so in trying to come to terms with whose son am I, which parents do I want to please, which parents' approval means the most to me, which parents love me unconditionally, I found myself turning to prayer and in that envisioning a spiritual mother and father who were quite different from my biological mother and father. And so there are times yet where I close my eyes and go into a state of meditation, and in my mind invite a conversation with mom and dad, and they're not the mother and father to whom I'm biologically related, but they are the ones that hold me accountable, that encourage me when I failed, that I should try again, that I should not give up, that I should believe in myself enough to reach for being the best I can be, even when circumstances are completely unsupportive. That it's not so much whether I'm liked or hated or applauded or booed. It's this persistent question of what kind of person will I show myself to be within this moment, within this situation, whether it goes well or whether it goes poorly. What kind of person will I show myself to be? And that's where I come back to this relationship, spiritual, emotional sort of relationship. And so in answer to this person, I wrote this song that I'd like to share with you now, in which what became clear to me, or the way I answered it, is that my father is wisdom and my mother is love. I rise in the morning and see the new day, stumbling along an uncertain way, wanting to find in each moment I see that which is real and the one who is me. My father is wisdom, my mother is love, within and without, below and above, the earth and the sky, the hawk and the dove. My father is wisdom, my mother is love. I run through the fields in the warm noontime sun, a race to my finish already begun, pretending my arms are wings that can soar to still higher places where I can learn more. My father is wisdom, my mother is love, within and without, below and above, the earth and the sky, the hawk and the dove. My father is wisdom, my mother is love. In the evening I listen at my father's knee, I attend to my mother's beckoning plea. I speak from my heart with my voice very loud, that what I want most is to make them both proud. My father is wisdom, my mother is love, within and without, below and above, the earth and the sky, the hawk and the dove. My father is wisdom, my mother is love. One day to the next, my journey goes on. Through tears and through laughter, I learn a new song. A song for the orphan and the one who's in pain, that through wisdom and love they be healed once again. My father is wisdom, my mother is love, within and without, below and above, the earth and the sky, the hawk and the dove. My father is wisdom, my mother is love. My father is wisdom, my mother is love. My father is wisdom, my mother is love.